Let's start with our president. President Biden gave an interview to CBS, and some of what that interview is about has made its way out into the public. And what Biden is concerned about is not confident at all in a peaceful transfer of power if Trump loses. He's saying that on CBS. And you have to keep in mind, remember that Trump said, if we lose, it will be a bloodbath. So that's no small thing. And he said that he was talking about for the country, just not for any one thing. Now, we also have him saying that this will be the last election, and he's reassuring Catholics that they won't have to vote again. They only have to vote this time. And then he's since explained that, air quotes, he's since explained that what he's really talking about is that, Catholics, don't like to vote. And so when they come and they vote for him this time, they won't have to vote for him the next time. It's amazing. Ever since, I guess, Nixon and Reagan, the Roman Catholics' faith and their mythological belief in a fecundated ovum have been used to present a wedge issue in the public domain. If you want to believe those things, that's fine. Just don't impose it on anyone else. And so, now, how dangerous is it that Trump would say this is the last election and make a bloodbath at that time? And the answer is, this time, the commander-in-chief is Biden. And so I think that the treachery and the danger is being circumscribed by the fact that Biden is in the White House, saw what happened on the 6th, and is not going to be caught flat-footed, and he's certainly not going to be sitting in another room watching people get beaten and the Congress being overtaken by criminals who've since been prosecuted and not sternly enough punished, in my opinion. But that's where we have. Now, let's turn to one of the chapters in the Trump fraudulent representations to the public. J.D. Vance has been attacking Waltz, saying, who is our vice president, if you're not used to the name yet, Tim Waltz from Minnesota is our vice presidential candidate on the Democratic line. And the accusation that Vance would put against him is that he, Waltz, has never been in combat. Well, Vance hasn't either. He was a military journalist when he was over there. So he talks about false pride and things like that. How does he compare his experience and criticize Waltz when Waltz was in the service for 24 years? There's never been anything critical of him before this. And hey, when you don't have to rely on the truth, anything goes. Meanwhile, of course, the ticket, I raised something like $33 million in one day, and the polls are starting to reflect movement toward the pairing. That is the two of them together, Kamala and Tim. And as you can hear, the rain is getting stronger. I give you an idea how protected I am here. So that's interesting to know. And now the one other thing that I'd like to talk about, if you can still hear me in the rain, is the prosecutions in Arizona against those phony electors, fraudulent electors, actually. There was a state prosecution there, and I think they had 11 Arizona Republicans, and they had 7 top aides to Trump, but not Trump. Now, I think I mentioned yesterday that Jenna Ellis who was an aide during the campaign to Trump, and you saw her alongside Rudy Giuliani and I guess others. She has agreed to cooperate and point fingers. One day after that, an Arizona Republican, Lorraine Pellegrino, has entered a plea to a misdemeanor, and I assume, as I would have done, and I assume they did it, that she's going to testify. Now, if we have these people connected to Trump and doing this on his behalf, why not Trump? Well, the grand jury is a device that will indict a ham sandwich. Now, that may not make sense to some people, but in other words, anything. as a prosecutor, I would go into a grand jury room, and there'd be 23 men and women who'd been sworn in. It's all secret proceeding. And they would, in the beginning, we would be presenting witnesses sufficient to make charges, and it couldn't even be hearsay. So it's not the most demanding level of evidence. It's some evidence. It's similar to probable cause. And some would say it is probable cause, but when you can have hearsay upon hearsay admitted into a forum, you might just as well have a prosecutor write it and sign it. And that's about why a grand jury is often considered not a reliable index of the seriousness of the offense, because a grand jury will indict anything. Now, every once in a while, we have what's called a runaway grand jury. And that's a grand jury that says, hey, wait a second, this isn't right, this isn't fair. You should be indicting X or Y, a corporate, a human, or whatever. Now, why would I go through all that? To explain to you, that's exactly what's happened in Arizona. In Arizona, the state case, the jurors said, okay, and we want to indict Trump. And the prosecutor, unnamed as of yet, resisted that and said no, and claimed as authority that this is not a policy in the Justice Department, and he may or may not have presented a PowerPoint. What else would you need to believe in the Justice Department? We need a PowerPoint, something fixated that you can see it in color, and that should persuade you, please, that don't indict this criminal. Now, among the things that it's concerned about is you shouldn't repeatedly prosecute someone for a similar offense. Now, stop the music. You're saying that if I committed crimes in 20 states, then you couldn't prosecute me in 20 states? States too. Now keep that in mind. And my answer is sure I could, because it magnifies the offense. It brings us to a point where you would plea bargain with a defendant, saying 20 states are all agreeable, and you might conjoin them in some jurisdiction by agreement or court order or something like that. But you just don't, whoa, you almost got me that time. But you don't conjoin innocence when there's offense. That's my view. So they should have indicted Trump, not on this policy, but do they have the evidence or they don't? What kind of a deal did they make for cooperation if they can't tell us that they're going to go forward with Trump? This is the problem about above the law. Now, why do I care about Arizona? I care because no man's supposed to be above the law, and that's not even close to what's going on. But on top of it, we apparently have evidence of a crime, and we're not going forward. That would not happen to you or I. I have dealt with state statutes that arguably bar a second prosecution if the federal government has done it. But the Chutkan prosecution is different, and the offenses are different, and it should matter that state X or Y or Z or Michigan or wherever should be able to prosecute, no, more than that, should prosecute somebody like Trump for what he's done wrong. So, I don't know if that's settled or not. You can file what's called a superseding indictment and basically say, we've listened to the grand jury and we're going to go forward with additional people. And keep in mind that, I see the water's coming into into my solitary confinement here. But one of the values of this is if Trump were elected, he can't do anything to a state prosecution. Right now we have a state prosecution in New York which resulted in convictions. Trump can't dismiss that. Now we'll know soon what the judge in that case is going to do with the recent Supreme Court case about official acts by the president. I think the chances are 95 to 5. The judge is going to say, no problem here. What offenses there are harmless error, meaning not sufficient or terrible enough to cause us to dismiss anything. And then they'll go to sentencing. If the judge does this before September 18th, September 18th, I believe, is on the calendar for the sentencing of Mr. Trump. Now, he might say, How could you do that? This is the end of the campaign. Well, maybe you should have thought about that when you were committing these crimes and when you were delaying the consideration of this. You could have had your trial and had a result and spend all that time arguing against it, or spend that time arguing you should be a president again. So that's what I got. And the rain didn't catch me. It's interesting. There's a nice sun out here. So I say goodbye to you from my gazebo. And tomorrow, maybe without rain, I'll be able to be outside and talk to you. I also had a long day in court. So in a way, this is vivifying. Absolutely vivifying. All the best. Bye-bye.